All right. Hey, there we go. Everything's looking good. Well,
Awesome.
welcome to Chris DeAppolonio, former president of the Houston Outlaws and current free agent, I suppose. We really appreciate having him on today, and he's going to just come along and answer some of our questions about what does it look like to be the president of an esports organization. Some of the cool things that we would never have considered. I grew up playing video games, and I loved them, and I still play them obviously to this day. We're going to play some Overwatch in a few minutes here, but this is a whole new realm for me, and I'm sure it's a whole new realm for a lot of people. And we're moving into this billion-dollar industry, and we have all of our students who want to go out and do things in this industry. And there's so many ways to engage with it that it's fun to look at sort of different aspects, which is why I wanted to start this sort of series. And Chris was kind enough to join us for this first one, and hopefully we can get some feelers out and get some more people in the industry that are in these sort of unique positions that are not necessarily gaming related, and we can show our students what does it look like, how do we get into that, what are the things that we need to do to prepare for that as we get into our education. So thanks, Chris. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me. Glad to, I guess, be batting lead off for you. And I think as people will see as we go play Overwatch, I'm definitely not a pro gamer.
Me either.
And now having two kids, it's tough to stay on top of it. But yeah, happy to answer as many questions as I can, and hopefully provide some good insight to anybody watching.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. I've got three of my own. One of them this morning dropped a weight, like a 6 pound weight, onto their toe, and he's one, so it's pretty bad. So we're dealing with that all morning, but he's okay, and he's sleeping now, so it works out pretty well for us. And this whole work at
That's
home
good.
thing is obviously kind of strange, and it's not unlikely that one of my kids at some point will walk through the door and want to say hi. But anyway, no big deal. I should also mention we have Patrick down here a little bit below us. Patrick, you want to say hi?
Howdy, Patrick Neff here. I'm sorry, no video for whatever reason. Discord doesn't like my camera, so you get a weird picture of me in a hat in Scotland. So
And that's fine. We like that picture. It's a good picture. Well, cool. Let me see. I had some questions that I had written down, and I need to pull up chat in Twitch. I normally have it in Streamlabs, but I was going through my Streamlabs is acting a little silly right now. So let me go back to the channel and pull up the
I have
Twitch
it
chat.
open as well.
Oh, well, there you go. Then, Patrick, you can be our moderator for questions in chat. So my point there was if you guys have any questions for Chris or for me or for Patrick or anybody throughout the stream and you want to ask them, just put them into chat. And thank you, Patrick, for having that up because it's not working for me right now. And let me know if those come up and we can ask them there. But I have a few as well. So let me pull those up. So I know you're not in Texas right now. Where'd you head
That's
off
right.
to?
I am currently in New Hampshire, in
Oh,
the gorgeous state of New Hampshire. So nice day today. It's like 60 degrees outside, but it snowed like 2 days ago. So we're kind of all over the place.
yeah. It's funny. Like that's actually kind of, well, it's a little warmer than that here, but not too much. It's actually a really nice day, other than the rain that we're having in Houston right now. But I've got a brisket on the smoker right now, and I'm ready to go. So it's becoming a beautiful summer, even
Perfect
with
time
all
to
of this
be
stuff.
using the smoker when
Yeah,
you're
for
home for like
sure.
14
Exactly.
hours.
Well, I mean, like I can tend to
Yeah,
the
or all
brisket and
day.
make it all. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
great. Okay, so to the point. Um, so first, can you give us some background on yourself? Like, how did you get into the esports industry? What was your education like, and how does all of that come together to get you to where you were and where you are now?
Yeah, so like pretty much everybody else, huge gamer growing up, played video games. My first console was Nintendo, and kind of stayed with Nintendo all the way through. But in high school, my friends and I got really into Super Smash Brothers Melee, like
Yes.
big time. Like it was all we would play all the time, and it got to the point where we went on to Smash boards, which think at the time was like Smash World forums, and started finding tournaments. And we used to go up and down the East Coast with like a CRT in our trunk,
Yeah.
driving to different like churches, convention halls, whatever, and playing. We even played at some kid's house, and the cops got called because they thought it was a party going on there. So that was kind of my like first like foray into what was, I guess you could call, esports.
Mhm.
But I never won any money. I was kind of like a mid-tier Jigglypuff on the East Coast, but it was a lot of fun. and had a blast playing it, and really kind of could see the start of things. That's very grassroots there with the FGC.
Yeah.
Kind of back in that time frame. That was like 01 to 06. And then at the time I was still in college. I went to Lafayette College in Pennsylvania and studied history and got a bachelor's degree in history. But one of my main passions was also sports, and so I wanted to work in the sports industry. I wanted to be like a GM or like president or essentially of a pro sports team. And so I went to NYU and got a master's in sports business and kind of studied the sports, everything in the sports industry, from player evaluation and contracts to ticketing and facilities to marketing, media, what have you. And so did a bunch of internships while I was there, with the New York Rangers hockey team, with a MMA group called the International Fight League, and with Major League Baseball. And while I was there, we had to write like a capstone paper thesis at the end of our time. And so I chose, I wanted to write mine on the rise of competitive gaming, which essentially was what I was calling esports then. And it was kind of a study on, I wanted to do a study on like what made traditional pro sports considered sports, right? They're just games, essentially, baseball, basketball, what have you. How did they become like what they were, and what kind of parallels and similarities did esports have to those, and what was it missing? Um, and so this was like that first esports boom where you had it on DirecTV and USA, and MLG was really huge with Halo, and so it was very popular. But the big thing that was missing was kind of social acceptance and kind of a
Yeah.
prevalence, cultural prevalence of gaming as a hobby, a pastime that's a positive thing and a competitive form of entertainment. And so I wrote the paper. My professors were like, "Video games aren't sports." So I was like, "Well, poker's on ESPN, so if that's a sport,
That's
then
fair.
video games are sports."
Nice.
Um, but that conversation has long come and gone of whether esports are sports or not. But that was kind of where I really got started in it. But I had experience in sports, and I wanted to stay in that and pursue that path. And so I moved to Texas from New York and started working for a couple different agencies doing sports marketing and consulting. And so I was helping brands like Chevy and Pepsi and AAA and Frito-Lay and others with all of their sports marketing strategies. So I would help them find partnerships. I'd evaluate their partnerships, negotiate the contracts, ensure that deliverables were met, like that they had the right sign, that they had tickets. Um, Helped with building out, like, if you ever go to a sporting event again,
Yeah.
like when you go to before the game, there's like you can go up to a tent, or there's a car display or something like that, and those were all things that I worked on and put together. And then in about 2014, one of our clients came to us and said, what does sponsorships look like for us in 2020? uh, and so we had this big think tank at our agency, and I raised my hand and I said, "You're going to be sponsoring. They're going to be sponsoring esports, without a doubt." And this was about like when TBS had announced E League, and kind of esports was on the cusp of coming back up to to being pretty popular.
Yeah.
And so I ended up taking building out like these little esports 101 educational decks, and went around the country to about 6 or 7 different clients, teaching them about esports, what it was, what was gaming, what was streaming, how to get involved, what are the opportunities, like who's involved already, in terms of like brands. And so I was doing that for a while, and then was also actually helping 2 brands with their strategy, both Miller Lite and Papa John's. In 2017, I was helping them figure out like how to get involved in gaming, and esports. And during that time, I met some people who were starting, who were with Optic and with Infinite Esports, and they were building out Infinite Esports Entertainment in Frisco. And so they
Oh
asked me to
yeah.
come on and help them with their partnerships,
Mhm.
because of my background and my knowledge of kind of the sports space and esports space, and and my just business experience. So I started with them in January of 2018 and worked there for about a year and a half or so until the group was sold to the Immortals Gaming Club. And it was during that time that the Immortals took over, that they had to essentially take the Outlaws and move them off to the side because they owned the Valiant and couldn't own two Overwatch League franchises. And so they needed somebody to help run the team until it could be sold to a new buyer. And so they kind of came to me and asked me if I'd be interested in it. I'd helped on or had led a lot of significant partnerships for the Outlaws with HEB and GameStop, and had helped out with some other people on bringing in T-Mobile, and then had worked with like a lot of the employees. Obviously, we all, except for like Flame and Adam and a couple of the operational people out in LA where the
Mhm.
team was based, all of the business operations were in Texas. And so I worked with all the main employees there pretty regularly. So we had a good rapport, and I took the job and was uh, was pretty excited by the opportunity to help kind of lead the team in the direction of the Outlaws as we kind of got moving. It was a crazy time because we didn't really have an office, so we were all working remotely,
Right.
and we were trying to figure out like what's the next step, who's gonna buy the team. How are we going to get everybody to Houston?
Yeah.
Because they're all out in LA. That's where all the teams had been for the first two seasons. So it was a massive undertaking, but it was a really good learning experience. I met a lot of phenomenal people, and they've got a really good team and group going right now. And I'm bummed about the Battle of Texas. That was a
Yeah.
heartbreaker at
It's a
the
good
end
match.
there. It was really, really a heck of a match back and forth, as it always is. And I think that those rivalries are so key to
Wear
the
my
continued
outlaw stuff
success.
today, by the way.
Yeah, nice.
Think you sold me this shirt?
I did. Yeah, that was a great shirt.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite parts. Was like working on some of the merchandise. Uh, and I may be just rambling here, but we had some really cool opportunities with like Ult to help create that shirt, as well as the Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos shirt that
Oh
we
yeah,
came out
which is
with,
awesome.
which was a very cool design. So there are a lot of good things. I know franchise leagues kind of sometimes get a bad rap, but I think there's a lot of good that comes with it. Obviously, it kind of puts you in a box sometimes, but there are some really great opportunities that would be hard to come by if you were kind of just going independently as a team.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of debate back and forth on the whole, franchise versus the sort of independent team mentality, and some of those things are, to me, I like to defend that because I can actually, your story sounds very similar to mine. Interestingly, I was I was a big gamer growing up, and I went to Texas A&M and majored in history, and and kind of went through some of the same routes, but I went the education path instead. So but at that point, like sports were a really big thing for me, and I was very much into them. I was considering doing a sports management master's at A&M because they had a pretty good program for it, and that kind of fell through when I got married. Honestly, it was just there was a whirlwind of other things that were happening, but that idea was there, and that passion for sports was there. And I think the model of the Overwatch League with the franchises and the marketing that's done there, I think it's really well done, and I think there are a ton of benefits to it. There are obviously pitfalls to both, well, all the different systems you can come through, but it's been I particularly love the Outlaws because of the branding, and I think I told you this in one of our first conversations. It's one of the best brandings in all of sports to me. Just the logo is so well done, and and honestly, the social media aspect, Chad, I guess, is on point all the time.
Chat.
I
Yeah,
can't believe the amount of
I don't.
engagement. It's great.
He he is something else. I don't know how, like, you have to applaud him. That guy's on the clock, 24/7. It's sometimes, I think, on the social media side, you get sometimes uh, you don't realize like how much time and effort goes into something like that. I mean, you never have a break. Like, it's hard to take time off in running that, especially with where you don't really have somebody to back you up.
Mhm.
I mean, at least when I was there, he was the sole guy, and so he's on the clock all the time, checking things out, interacting with fans, coming up with new pieces, kind of being in the moment. It's a lot of that moment marketing
Yeah.
and being on top of things happening. And if you miss out on something, especially on Twitter, but if you get to it like an hour late, it's kind of like,
Yeah.
well, I mean, what's the point at this point? So, yeah, but to go back to the logo, I think the guys that came up with it early on, it's just an unbelievable piece. The color scheme's obviously great, harkening back to Optic,
Yeah.
but also just like the mix of the revolvers with the horns. You really can't. It's just such a subtle nod to a variety of things that I just love the look of it. It's definitely the best one in the league for sure.
Yeah. So one more question before we jump into Overwatch, and I have some more questions that I'll ask as we're playing. But the one I wanted to get to while we were still in this sort of view where we can see it is, do you do you feel like there was anything that specifically helped you the most, or really gave you the most insight on the things that you were going to be doing as, we'll say, instead of just as a president, but just in general, like the corporate culture of an esports organization? And there's a bunch of other groups and a bunch of other people, excuse me, that I've met now through you, and that little bit of a connection with the Outlaws, like Herbie and Sarah and Lauren, and so all great people, and probably would have similar answers. But I'd love to hear what you think about what was the thing that really most helped you. Was it either education or volunteer opportunities or internships, or some combination of all three?
Yeah, I think for me, I think the internships, were key, in terms of just getting myself to a point where like I could succeed in both in sports, esports business, what have you. Um, you know, like I was very lucky to have three phenomenal like groups to work for, but any internship is really like it's almost like a test and learn opportunity. The you have the ability to make it however you make it what you want. Like you can just kind of do the basic and get through it and put the experience on your resume and maybe make some connections. That's great, but like when you're with, I mean, you're there to learn, and people who have you as an intern, I think, kind of understand that, and they want their people, at least like when I have interns, like I wanted them to raise their hand and like ask me like, hey, like what can I do, like,
Hmm.
or I have this passion, is there something that I can do around this? And like honestly, an intern is a great asset for a company to have. They can help you with certain types of work, but it's supposed to be an education. And I think raising your hand and learning to raise your hand and try a lot of different things, because it helps you really understand like what's out there. Like when I was with the New York Rangers, my internship was in fan development, and so that is everything from like it was like I ran, I answered emails, I answered fan mail, I ran their junior Rangers kids club, I put together like summer camps. I was the guy who handled like the little pee wee hockey kids that played on ice in between the intermissions. But then I'd raise my hand for like a crazy amount of tasks. Like I worked on charity stuff that wasn't part of my purview. I helped with ticket sales. I worked in suites and did hospitality. I drove a pickup truck around and set up an inflatable hockey goal and taught kids how to do a slap shot.
Nice.
And like the ability to kind of just in a way like adapt and get a really good wealth and variety of skill set. Yeah, I mean, it's great to be a super expert in a field, and especially if it's like a technical field, it probably makes more sense to go that route. But from a business sense, I felt like being somewhat of a jack of all
Yeah.
trades and having a really well-rounded background and the ability to kind of just like raise your hand, like, look, I'll do this job, or I want to try to see if I can find a solution here. At least for my internship days, was I think helped set me on a good path.
Yeah. I think it was Adam Achapella. I don't know if that's how you say his last name, but anyway, I know you know him. He went on a Twitter. I'm not going to call it a rant, but it was a soapbox, I guess, about how that is absolutely the number one thing you can do is just start doing things and be in the
Yep.
internships and get your foot in the door, not even necessarily just for the connections, but so that you are a guy who knows how to do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And even in my position, and Patrick, I would say the same thing. Like we're educators. I was a teacher last year. I was a seventh grade, eighth grade English teacher, and that was all I had done as far as like my career field I'd gone. But at this point, when I got in touch with Patrick and Danielle and a few other people for tech stuff, it turned into, okay, how do we learn how to do all of these things that we need to know how to do to run this effectively? And it's obviously for us, it's still coming together, but I think it's coming together well, and it's been the kind of thing where, like, if you're looking at a stream, you can see all the stuff around here. I've streamed a little bit for fun here and there, but having to figure
Mm-hmm.
out how do we go about our partnerships with NASEF and TCEA, and what do we do about our logo, and like how do we go through Illustrator and actually create these things. I mean, there's just tons of things that we've had to pick up and learn as skills throughout the way, and luckily now we've got a big enough board with a wide enough variety of skills that it's not been as intense on just the two or three of us, but yeah, we're enjoying it. So, but yeah, I mean, that's great. I think that's a really awesome answer, and I'm going to really quickly try to transition over to my other scene. And this is one of those things where I'm like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
still learning how to live stream, but I'm pretty sure I can do this. I
Yeah,
have to
for
turn off my
sure.
video
And
though.
I think if like for anybody in high school, who is part of an esports club or a gaming club at their school, trying to take on some responsibility now where you have a safety net, and you have people like Greg and Patrick and the other groups who are gonna like help guide you along. You can really learn some valuable skills and have something to put on your resume. So like when you see an entry level job and it's like, oh, this requires like 3 years of experience. Well, they don't necessarily mean 3 years of working experience. They mean like 3 years of like valuable time that you have an idea of like what to do if somebody hands you an assignment or a task. And so learning, doing things in high school, whether that's, hey, I would be the treasurer and I know how to handle money and I know how to work budgets and spreadsheets. I mean, those are actually like valuable skills in the workplace, and not a lot of people may be able to have that, especially going from high school into college. And I think your teachers or your administrators who are handling like overseeing an esports club can really kind of help guide you along that path. Or if you're like, I want to help, like I'm really interested in like how do we make this thing bigger? Okay, well, like you can handle the social media account for your school's gaming club, or if they allow that, maybe like figure out how to do marketing in town once like the world gets back to normal, or online. You have a passion for photography or videography, and you could, try to take photos of everybody playing, or figure out how to do some cool YouTube or social content. I think that's one of those things where like not everybody in like probably a lot of people have a wide variety of passions, and we'll get to this I'm sure, but like esports, I mean there's so many opportunities now. I mean, if you want to be in HR, like people, companies and teams need HR people, need accountants, need obviously graphic designers. I think that the opportunities are endless. So don't feel like you have to go to a school and specifically to get a degree in gaming or esports to be able to work in the industry.
Nice. Yeah. Patrick, has there been anything while I'm going to go ahead and start up Overwatch and start getting you guys into a party here. But Patrick, if you want to turn off your video at this point, Chris, I'm on the other scene, so you're more than welcome to.
Okay.
Have you seen any questions come up in chat or anything?
The only one that I saw come up was a question about finding his thesis online, and it looks like he responded to it. So
There you go.
I did, yeah.
But yeah, just kind of to follow up on what you were saying, there are a lot of areas that you mentioned that could be in the esports arena that are not necessarily directly game related. So, in your opinion, someone could approach esports from a lot of different pathways, a lot of different approaches, different majors, where they could find that thing that they're good at and channel it into the esports scene. Do you think that's an
Totally.
accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you have to jump right into esports, to get started. You look at myself or Lauren Schrader, who we brought on with the Outlaws when I was there. She came to us from a variety of different non-esports related companies. She was with Ironman and Houston Astros prior to that. The video production company that the Outlaws were using when I was there, and I think still are. They were in kind of traditional sports and entertainment, and so I think there's a lot of transferable skills, and just because you're really good at a game or like super passionate about video games doesn't mean that you're going to be the best employee or best potential, like have the best potential for um, for um, for success. So like having working in business maybe to start is probably not a bad way to go, because there's going to be
Okay.
probably maybe more options that way. If you work if you find that something you like to do, but stay within kind of stay on top of the gaming and esports space, and then figure out like the right opportunity to jump in.
Okay. And do you think, another question from the chat, do you see a world in which the path to pro includes the education route, going, high school to college to traditional sports, kind of similar to what football, baseball do now? Do you see that path building, or do you think we're not there yet?
Um, let's see. I think it's hard to say, because each game is gonna try to do it a different way. I feel like I think the path to pro is probably going to skip college. Like if you're really good at a game, you are most likely going to be plucked out before you get specifically into playing for a college team. That would just be my assumption and guess as things continue to move and kind of scouting gets a little bit better. But from a high school standpoint, it looks like there's a lot of high school clubs. I don't think any game developer is going to kind of try to handle that. I think from a responsibility and cost standpoint, they're going to let schools kind of do that on their own.
Ooh, it's been a while, y'all.
Yeah.
Oh man. But yeah, this is great stuff. Like it's really cool for our students to be able to hear these kind of answers and responses to some of the things that we're asking about. It's like you don't get to talk to someone who's been involved in the industry like that every day. So we appreciate it again.
With the heels.
Even if I can't keep you alive, I'm sorry.
All good.
Oh yeah, Echo. That's a thing now.
Got him.
Ooh. A headshot. So, Chris, as much as you can talk and play at the same time, which I know is, for me is like nigh impossible. Oh no, you're good.
Yeah, I'm not very good at that, so I apologize. But I think let's see. What other? You guys have any other questions?
Yeah, I was gonna say, what do you think in general? I mean, about the growth of Scholastic Esports sort of within the past year or so. I feel like it's gotten a lot bigger. A lot more people are sort of engaged with it.
I've been really impressed actually by by how many gaming clubs are popping up. I have some friends who are educators back in New Jersey, where I'm from, and they've been reaching out to me about how to start a club, or how to how to look for partners, or how to find equipment for their Road Dog coming in from the side here. And so I think it's been great to see, because like when I was in high school, we didn't have that. We were doing that all on our own. So it's been it's really cool, I think, because it provides kids an opportunity to do something outside of the classroom that maybe if they're not, big into sports or big into the arts, they can still interact with their friends and have a community, and learn some positive skills. I think esports provides a lot of valuable, a lot of valuable things that traditional sports does as well. When you think about like teamwork and communication, and I think parents are starting to realize there's a lot of positive that comes out of gaming. That's not just like, hey, these kids are just sitting in their basement doing, essentially doing nothing. People are learning a lot when it comes to playing together. And like I said, if you can kind of marry that with some like actual, other learnings with like marketing, or if you're interested in like helping out your club in certain ways, I think it's like a kind of a win-win. Plus, you're getting to play video games.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think some of the games are a little bit harder to put together. I would assume, at least like when I went to high school, like our school didn't have a lot of budget, so like having like 12 gaming PCs or 10 gaming PCs would be like way out of the question. But like having a couple setups for like Smash Brothers or some type of fighting game, I think would totally have been doable.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we see on a school-to-school basis. It's completely different for everybody. Some schools are really, say, well off and just have the ability to whip out 12 gaming PCs on a whim, which is great, but it's kind of rare. And so one of the problems that we see at TechSouth is like some schools assume that you have to be able to do that right off the bat, and it's not really the case at all. Really, you're a lot better off trying to start slow and have one or two, or if you've got students with consoles, I can bring them in and you can try and find a way to compete in console leagues, and that's fine too. So those are the kinds of things we're trying to accommodate and help people sort of learn. Oh my goodness, this Winston.
Yeah, I think a lot of we're getting crushed here, by the way. I think a lot of and that's the thing. Like you see, like some educators aren't don't realize that it doesn't have to be so perfect, right? It doesn't have to be the we just lost Jeff Kaplan. Just kidding.
Yeah, that's what it was.
It can just be like, hey, we've got a TV or a projector in a room. Let's bring in a Nintendo Switch or an Xbox and just like or PlayStation and just start something. You don't have to like have a perfect facility to get something like this started.
Yeah.
I mean, what are the like for the the students who are coming in, like what are the games that you guys are mostly playing?
Patrick, you want to talk about it? I feel like I've been talking a lot. Maybe not. Maybe he's not here. We are pretty much focused right now. Our seasonal structure is going to be 3 separate seasons. With obviously we'll have weekend tournaments for other games and things like that in the middle. But the 3 main seasons will be League of Legends, which luckily is kind of being facilitated through NASEF, which we're appreciative of their contributions. But League of Legends, Overwatch, and Rocket League. And so instead of one of the big issues that we saw with a lot of our sponsors was that they were overwhelmed whenever they were having to deal with several leagues, and they're all doing all games all the time, and so they've got kids in there every day of the week, and it's madness for them to try to manage all of that. And so the idea we came up with to sort of belay that is this seasonal structure, which is, again, it's very similar actually to what NASEF does. And so that way they're focused really on one game at a time, and they can work with their students to have practices for other games whenever they need to, or do other competitions even within other leagues, and that's perfectly fine. But it just gives sort of a focused drive on those particular games at any given time.
Smart. Yeah,
But,
kind of compartmentalize it.
Yeah.
And how does like high school star league or things like that, ratchet into what you guys are doing, if at all?
There's not a whole lot of high school star league activity that we've come across. Not to, say anything against Texas Star League. I just haven't really talked with them very much. Whereas you do have other programs out there like PlayVS and NASEF and where else? HSEL is another one that's just got a ton of different. I'm trying to focus on healing. A ton of different games they offer at any given time, and so we basically just say that we are an option, and we want the state of Texas to kind of run through us as much as possible. But if their teams within Texas want to, say they have a big group and they really want to run Rainbow Six Siege, just as an example, we're not going to do Rainbow Six Siege personally, just because of the, it's Texas high schools and gun violence, and it's not a battle we want to fight in a second. But not that we necessarily have any problem with it, but it's not something we want to fight at this time. So it's but there are plenty of other programs that do offer that, and so we will be happy to send people onto them when we need to. I kind of lost my train of thought.
Yeah,
it's a really hard
that's
game
okay.
to play.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, you have to think about people who are streamers and can dominate in gameplay and still talk and interact. It's actually a lot harder than you think.
Yeah, no, dude, everyone thinks they can be a streamer, but that is not an easy skill.
No, it's not an easy skill. But we're doing pretty well right now. We got a good base. Look at this, up 61. I will admit, it's been a while. I have not played Echo or anybody yet. But it's nice to see, let's just talk Overwatch League for a little bit. I think there's a lot of, obviously the bans and bans have been a very polarizing feature of the season. From my point of view, I think it's kind of cool that they're trying something new to spice up the meta, and so you don't see all these mirror matches. While I know it's they're still trying to work things out, I think the fact that they have said look, let's try to figure something new. Let's look at some new options, and to me, it's been fun to see some heroes that you don't normally see played get into the action, like Ash and others who who have never been really in competitive play for a while, actually getting to be on the stage.
Yeah, that's been great. I completely agree.
Yeah, they definitely have to innovate to keep the game interesting. Apologies, I'm in and out. I'm in a meeting also.
It's okay, we just recap. We got this. GG.
Easy game. Oh man, that was better.
Much better.
What else did I have on here? I had a little list of questions. Bring it back up. Oh yeah, so that was a good point of this. Within esports, and especially within League of Legends, actually recently, there's been a lot of talk about how the tier 2 scene, and then really to a lesser extent, it's not really been talked about. Oh, this has actually been a good conversation within Overwatch too. How a lot of the tier 2 scene has been not abandoned, but just less active, or maybe it doesn't seem like it's being relied on as much. I'm not really sure the best way of going about that question, but
yeah, are you talking about with contenders?
Yeah, but really with the purpose of shifting the focus to, how do you think Scholastic Esports fits into that sort of pipeline?
Yeah.
From and collegiate as well. I mean, when I talk about Scholastic, I don't necessarily just mean high school.
Yeah, I think it definitely has an opportunity to be kind of that growth that growth platform and testing ground to train and find new talent. The costs associated with running an academy team, or trying to kind of host that within your own organization can be a lot and very time consuming, especially when you're trying to focus on winning at the highest levels. You look at almost every traditional sport, and that's kind of where they've landed, is let's let these colleges and high schools kind of put those things out there, train these athletes, and there's an Ash on the roof, and kind of grow them and teach them, and then we can find we can find those people and pluck them once they get to the next level.
Yeah.
So I think from a Scholastic point of view, like the high schools, it's still very early. Like esports is probably still on the bottom of the first inning, to use more sports analogies, but it's still very early on in the life cycle of this industry, and so it's not something that really has been has grown yet, and I think we'll get there, but it's probably going to be another I would say at least 5 years, if not longer, for something like very structured to come about. You look at like what just happened with the NCAA and changing how they're doing business or allowing athletes to get endorsements, and I think they're starting to see the light. But I don't know if we want the NCAA touching esports. I mean, they are a very rigid group, and they're a very tough one when it comes to like trying to adapt and modify, and be a part of new things. I think it's taken them like a decade to get where they are, to allow athletes to get endorsements. But I think high school and college can definitely be a breeding ground, for people who are looking to be very competitive and potentially get a pro career. But you could also see it taking the shape of like baseball, where obviously high school baseball is great, but like you look at like the traveling leagues and are really like the important place for people to be, and then they get plucked from there probably straight out of high school rather than go to college. But there's still pros that come from college. It's just less than who are straight up drafted out of high school. And I think with the age range for esports, that's probably what it's going to be, where you will have more people coming directly from high school into the pros rather than going high school, college, and potentially pro.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's an interesting dynamic in general. You just don't see it talked about, like the high school scene very much, or even the collegiate scene. You don't see it talked about very much. One esport that I think does a really great job with it is Rocket League. They have the whole collegiate Rocket League series, which has been very, very active, and it has huge viewership, and everybody loves it. And I think
they have embraced that.
Yeah, I like the idea that there's a lot of people have questions about things like NACE and what the kind of job their day is, which is the National Association for Collegiate Esports, I think. And so there's people don't really know, is that going to be like an official organization? And it's just it's up in the air right now, and so it's interesting to see. There's a
question from the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Going off the point about career pipeline, what's something colleges could do to better attract talent, especially at the highest level? It's hard to turn down an offer from a tier 1 organization to play for your college. Would NCAA involvement or better scholarships, or do you have some other thoughts or ideas, maybe something more innovative?
To attract tier 1 competitive talent?
Just to get that high level talent at college.
That's a great question. That's hard to say, because I think, from my point of view, as somebody who is much older now, I think it's very hard. It would be very hard to turn down a full ride to a college or university. But the growth potential of playing for a tier 1 org probably doesn't happen very often. If you're talking about getting picked up for, like, let's just say League of Legends for like a TSM or Liquid, then I don't see how you could turn that down. That would be like essentially, you are one of the best players in the world, and you have a massive opportunity to jump into it, just like any other pro athlete would be doing from a traditional sports standpoint. I think if it's a tier 1 organization like that, you would have to take that. Not that education is, education is great, but I think that opportunity you couldn't turn down, because you can always go back to school. But if you're not going to be playing right away, or it's maybe a team that doesn't have the prestige of a Liquid or TSM, then I think the full ride is a very strong carrot. I don't know. Maybe there's something more innovative, but I don't know of anything that the NCAA or a college can offer that would be, that they can do other than a scholarship, just because of the regulations that the NCAA places on these schools. And out of here, Ash. Sorry.
Yeah, it's causing me problems too. What do you think about, like, the NBA did the thing where they have an age limit, and so that was more the league play that put that in.
Saw a little power up there for you.
Or do you even think any of the organizations would consider
I don't
doing?
know if any of the organizations would consider that. And also, it's tough because it's such a larger global sport than than.
Yeah. Well, I think a big part of it's going to be just in general.
Being picked from.
Our Discord must be getting on a junior.
That get through this here and figure out what I'm going to say.
A big part of it's going to be.
I think it's
Go ahead.
Certain games, for instance, right? You can't play until you're 18. And so I think some games may adhere to it, but like the NBA, well, that's the only place. And so they can have all the developers and all of the leagues that are running independently or from a first party all agreeing to that same thing. It's going to be very hard to enforce it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're probably right too.
I think a big part of it is just going to be the continual growth of the esports industry, because we're going to have, once we can, there's, I guess as it gets even more mainline, it's definitely become a lot more mainstream than it was, but as it continues to grow, you're going to have more players, more talent, more equity. It's just by nature thing. So
yeah, I think it's just so too early to tell. And some of these games that are popular have only been around for 10, 15 years, and what kind of staying power will they have? What new games will come about? I think the opportunity and the flexibility of esports is something that makes it very attractive for people to get into, because there's going to be new games happening. There's going to be new streaming platforms, new media platforms. I consider working in esports like working in almost a dog year scenario, where it's 1 month in esports feels like 3 months or more. And I think that is very enticing for people to get into, because you never know what's going to be coming next and what new things will be popping up. And so
yeah. Let me ask you this, kind of following up on a comment in the chat, mentioned that as the college scene grows, we might see more of an established path to pro pipeline.
Yep.
Do you think the so many of the top players come from solo queue, and it to an extent it shows that they are accustomed to playing alone.
Yeah.
Especially in the North American scene, I think you see a lot of that. I'm a good individual player, but I don't necessarily have that communication skill. I don't necessarily have that that teammate side. Do you think maybe some of that being developed, especially at the high school level and into the college level, may benefit the organizations being able to draw from a pool of players who've grown that way?
I definitely think so. I'm not an expert when it comes to evaluating talent, but listening to Flame and others, mechanical skill would only get people so far, they said, and a lot of it came down to how they were as a person, whether they had a positive attitude, whether they're a good team player. And I think, having a good coaching staff and operations group at these high school and college levels that can help build that out, and mold those people from just having a fantastic mechanical skill set to somebody who can be a good part of an organization is probably a great growth opportunity, when it comes to kind of developing talent and helping these people maybe take the next step to becoming a pro and really know how a team environment kind of functions and works. Because especially in Overwatch with bans now, you may not be on the starting roster all the time, and so you've got to really
Yeah.
understand how, from a communication standpoint and a team standpoint, you can help the team succeed even if you're not maybe starting.
Yeah.
Like you look at poor Linksu,
Yeah, I was gonna
and like
say.
every other week I feel like the guy doesn't even
Getting banned out.
isn't
Yeah.
even going to be playing because they're banning out McCree and Widowmaker. And so he's got to figure out ways, as a good member of the team, to continue to help the organization and help his team succeed. And you got to continue that positive mindset and communication. And I think the let's go with this guy. I think the schools, especially on the college level, can help build that. Um, you know, uh, I also agree with the point that it's probably still very early. But you look at like some colleges are really starting to build out their esports programs. Facilities are being built, and I think I think you will start. Yeah, I think you can start to see at some point, in the future, organizations using like big esports organizations um, using colleges and high schools as kind of a feeder system.
Yeah.
Because that they put the coaching and development early on some of those administrations, and as well as in like solo queue essentially, and then they have a somewhat molded product that they can help bring in to a higher tier level, once they get through high school.
Gotcha. One of our pushes with esports and with TechSef is the sort of the, for lack of a better term, like the physical education and the other stuff that goes with. As an organization, did y'all do a lot of, for example, personal trainers or other kind of, things, sports psychologists, things like that might help with just making sure your players are where they need to be mentally and physically rather than just on their play skill?
Sports psychologist was always discussed as something very important that we were never able to, get together. But I agree that those things are paramount for the success of an organization. Back at Infinite Esports, we actually had a strength and conditioning team. Actually, it was the Innovative Performance Institute, and their big focus was on healthy eating and healthy minds, and helping players find that find additional edge and success through regular exercise, eating healthy, and I think for some teams that might be being neglected at this point, and it really it's expensive, but I think there's a lot of value to it if you can get your players to buy into it and get them to be to take part in that. I think they're going to really see the value of those kind of things over the long days and grinds, especially at a live event.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stamina, both mentally and physically, that goes into those tournament settings. Playing at a high level for an extended period of time, at least from what.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to be like you look at some of the old Call of Duty events, and they were like 10 hour plus days,
Yeah.
where you're on the stage maybe 2 to 3 times. That is a massive mental strain, and you also have to worry about how are you kind of going back from being the highs and lows of like playing and then kind of resting. I think like trying to figure out how to handle that from a from a mental standpoint is really important to ensuring you're at the top of your game every time you're on the stage.
I have officially decided I hate Echo. Being on the other team, I haven't played it yet. Just playing again.
Yeah, I love to see you talked about college Rocket League. I love Rocket League as a game. I think it's phenomenal. Just from the way it's been built out, it's easy to understand. The fact that it's 3v3 makes it very simple to put together a match and a matchup. So I'm excited to see that continue to grow. I think a lot of schools from a high school level should look at that as one of their first kind of forays into it because of how safe it is.
And the fact that it's cross-platform is massive. Makes a huge difference. I really thought I flashed him.
Sorry.
That's all good. I was gonna die if I did that, so you actually saved me.
I put that up and saw you jump. I was like, oh.
I tell you, I'm no linkser. With all the Valorant I've been playing, you'd think I'd be better at aiming.
No, I'm bad at Valorant too. It's pretty much the same.
This Baptiste keeps blocking my high noons.
So with schools being out, like how are you guys essentially continue? Are you continuing on with with your gaming club? Are you trying to do it remotely? Like how are students trying to interact during this time together?
Mostly
when you don't have these extracurriculars.
For us,
anymore?
it's remote. We're hosting some Tech Stuff at home events right now. We actually have a tournament tomorrow for Rocket League.
Oh, cool.
But we're hosting online and just doing what we can because there's only so much we can do in these settings.
What a great segue. Thank you for that, Chris.
Yeah, you're welcome. I was just thinking about it. I was like, man, there's nothing they can do right now. I wonder how they're handling it.
Not well, honestly. I feel like we were making tons
hard.
of momentum, and it just all died because everybody's stuck, and nobody's able to do these kind of things that we'd really like to be able to do. But we're seeing some good engagement. We had 21 teams last week. I think we've got. I think we're up to that many signed up again, and we've still got the signups open. So we've even been engaging with some of the other states. I believe we actually have some other state representatives in the chat right now. But yeah, we're in. We had some Ohio teams. I think we've there might have been some Iowa or Illinois teams that we've reached out to. Like we're trying to really open it up, and what's cool about it is with everything else shut down, that's our chance to really show that, even in this COVID-19 time and in this era, we're able to really still do things because we still have the ability to do esports, and you can do it from home and you can play from safe spaces. And if this is Texas, but God forbid football doesn't happen next fall.
Yeah.
Esports can. And so, here's a good question for you. Would heavy NCAA involvement, do you think, be a good or a bad thing for collegiate esports?
Oh, that's like the $1 million question. I tend to think initially that it would be. I mean, I could go both ways. I think my gut says it's probably a bad thing because of the regulations and stipulations that they would put on it.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe the NCAA is starting to change with allowing personal endorsements, but these teams and trying to stream and handle the. I don't know. I feel like the NCAA can be seen as very corrupt sometimes and have a lot of issues, and I think that it's going to be hard for a very old group like the NCAA to jive with kind of the esports world. You also look at how that could affect things like Title IX and traditional scholarships. I would assume a booster of a big school like A&M would be pretty pissed if they somehow had to like lose out on scholarships for a big sport that for that school like football, basketball, or baseball to bring in scholarships for an esports club. I think at the start it's probably better for things to run as they are, where these are almost like clubs. Some of them are varsity sports, but without NCAA involvement. Um, but I think if the NCAA just picked one game and said, look, like we're gonna do College Rocket League, and that's gonna be that. Like that's esports in college from at a start. I think they could maybe find a solution. But if they just like jump into it and try to regulate it and put every esport under one heading, it's going to get really ugly really fast. And esports as a whole, especially from people trying to stream or do YouTube videos, is probably better off not having NCAA involvement. I just think about like there's this one punter from some random school, like I want to say like Florida Atlantic or Tulane or something like that, and he was posting trick shot videos of him kicking a football into like garbage cans and all this stuff. And essentially, he like lost his scholarship, and there's a whole like big issue because he was making money off of YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah,
as like
and
as a
that's a
college
concern
athlete.
for us too. You know, we've got kids who stream now, and at the high school level, you know, we have the same amateurism rules really that the NCAA has on not making money on it, and that's something we have to figure out if the official state organization decides they want to oversee esports, that they're not set up for a world where a kid has a Twitch or a YouTube channel and makes $20 a month. He's technically a professional at that point, and you know, he's not getting paid by an organization or anything like that, but the rules aren't necessarily written to accommodate such a new platform and a new medium.
Yeah, and I think that's where like the NCAA is going to have a hard time getting up to speed on those kind of things. You know, whereas like, I mean, if that same person was like working at Home Depot and making $20 an hour, that's not like that doesn't seem like it's a problem. You know, at least especially at the high school level. But like once it somehow like they're on Twitch playing a game, and I mean somewhat competing, I guess, but having a stream, then it makes it just gets this murky water area that for esports is probably better off without the NCAA being involved.
Yeah. It's an interesting situation in general with just one of the issues that we've sort of come up with is whenever we're talking about esports, we're not talking about, a conceptual game. We're talking about something that is an IP that belongs to developers and has contracts and certain EULA guidelines and all sorts of things that we have to navigate these legal waters just to play the game, much less to run a tournament or something like that with it. And so that's always going to be an issue, I think, with esports. But I do think that the idea of like a greater governing agency doesn't necessarily. It's not a bad idea for some of those things, so we can navigate those legal waters a little bit more easily. It's almost like a union in that sense, but just something that makes it a little bit easier. Tech stuff, we have to tread lightly in some places, and I can tell you the same for all the other high school esports organizations. Have that same problem of you just really have to make sure that you're doing the right things and not stepping on toes that you should be stepping on. So.
Yeah, and I mean Oh,
go ahead. I was gonna say I could see like obviously there's some positives that could come with the NCAA kind of overseeing it, where you look at like the standardization and creation of like a league and a match system that is essentially seen as like this is how we're playing college esports. They can organize it all, and it kind of gets to a level of exposure as an independent group it may not be getting. So I think there are positives like of potentially the NCAA taking over. I think esports is just like so big and broad of a word though. Like what game do they play? And there's just so many questions. I just don't know what, I don't know how the NCAA comes up with those answers.
Oh. I'm bad. I just pressed the wrong button.
But I think I think the Overwatch League and like the regionalized teams at least provide like a great opportunity, to really connect with the high schools and colleges in their area. I feel like that is something that I never got to get going with the Outlaws, but something that like I feel like is so important, to help continue to engage with fans and grow the fan base in the local market, whether these schools play Overwatch or not. I think isn't necessarily uh, isn't necessarily the first a problem at the start. It's like just like how do teams in a local market connect with people and gamers who have interest in potentially have interest in this, and I think it's a great way to grow a local fan base and provide some insight, as well as provide some, maybe some internship opportunities. I talked about how important I felt those were. And if you're like you're looking at the esports space and trying to better understand how do I fit into this world, or what kind of jobs could I potentially do, having a team local to your market to be able to jump into and, connect with those people and make contacts in the industry seems such an invaluable opportunity, and just a great way for these teams to kind of continue growing their local fan base.
Yeah, and I mean, I definitely think there's, just from the perspective of kind of finding a way to, I guess, like not just the marketing side, although there's definitely that, but, with the football team, for example, yeah, I mean, there are kids playing football in high school and even middle school and younger, but I don't play football at this point in my life because getting 22 people together to really play the game, it's just not a reasonable thing to happen, right? But what if, whereas with something like esports, there's this sort of, there's an ability to play the same game in the same way that the pros do that you don't see in traditional sports. Yeah, maybe a pickup game of basketball here and there, but I don't play with the same set of rules even when we do pickup basketball as, say, an NBA team does, or even an NCAA team does. And so I think there's really an opportunity to connect with your community in a way that other sports just can't.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can do something with this. Echo up top.
That was not a good ult. For some reason I thought they were multiplayer. Oh well. I guess that means I can change characters.
Tough to push through this here.
Suddenly we all get quiet as we're focusing.
I know, right?
Yeah, I know. I thought we had a chance
lost a
here
player.
to take that
One of our
potentially.
things left.
Yay! That's the best. So this is where we start to talk about, toxicity and
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, the number of
Definitely
games
Well,
I've
I mean,
played.
like one of the crazy things was that I don't know if you guys watched the NASCAR, what NASCAR's been doing with iRacing.
Yes.
yeah, it's really cool.
Really, I mean, that's a crazy showcase of like, how kind of staying level-headed in gaming really matters. One guy might be out of racing forever,
Yeah.
based upon what he said, and then another guy lost a sponsorship because of it. So.
Yeah, I mean that is such an important thing for not only our players but just communities in general, the whole feeling that the internet is just a place where I can go and say and do whatever I want, no consequences. I would really love to see that concept change in the near future, because it's such an awful thing in our society to see people go, oh well, the internet's here, so a thing I would never say in person, I'm going to say, repeatedly here because no consequences.
Yep. Yeah, and yet, like, when you've got a face cam on, there's a massive eyeballs on you, and it's,
Yeah.
I mean, if they had said that in a race, potentially,
Nobody would have
like,
known.
a couple people hear it on like their radio headset, but I mean, there's no quitting in the midst of a regular race, and for some reason, I guess he thought he could just do it within the virtual one. But yeah, it's hard. I'm sure people get salty. It's tough. Tough to kind of keep your head on your shoulders sometimes, especially when your only outlet of like aggression is, beating your own keyboard down.
I mean, my keyboard/desk has gotten its fair share of abuse and punishment.
I'm very proud
But
of that.
I do that instead of yelling at people.
Yeah, I think it's the.
Hold them. We got this. Thinking we got this.
Yes.
Finally. My God.
That took forever.
Woo! They did not want to give up that point.
Well,
So I guess Zenyatta's not very good anymore.
that's what I hear. You don't see him play anymore, do you?
No, I love Zenyatta. What a great hero, though.
Yeah, I didn't ever really play him, and then I tried him one time and like led in eliminations and said, oh, maybe I should play Zenyatta more. One thing I love about
That's why I play
Overwatch.
Moira as support. I like being murder support, where if my DPS isn't doing its job, I can always do it for you.
Yeah, exactly.
I think you rezzed me like 3 or 4 times on that last push. I didn't go
did.
back any of the times I died. I just kept
Yeah,
getting back up.
That's funny.
every time it kept coming up, I was like, oh look.
That was, I loved it.
Need as much heals as we can get.
All right, let's do one more, get a few more questions
Okay.
in, and then we'll call it a day, I think.
Sounds good.
I do like the comment from Matt in the comments about being a physical entity like the Houston Outlaws or the Dallas Fuel, rather than randomly being TSM or Cloud9. I support teams in League of Legends, but I as much as they're not even in Houston anymore, but now Dignitas, previously Clutch Gaming, I supported them as much because they were the local team as because I especially loved the team. And so I do think that kind of having that local
regional loyalty,
connected to a region, I think that makes a difference. And I think the collegiate scene will see some of that as well. I'm going to root on the A&M team, whether they're garbage or not, because that's my university,
Whoop.
Yep. I'm totally on board with that. I think that's, when a lot of these tier 1 orgs, like let's say like your League of Legends style orgs are like the TSMs and Cloud9s and what have you. They're in LA, so they're not able to connect locally with anybody from a regional geographic basis. But when you have your offices for the Outlaws in Houston, or the Houston area, and you have the ability to kind of do things in market and really kind of connect with your fans that if you're not in a regional franchise league like Overwatch League or Call of Duty, you really can't do that. I think that's one of the bummers about this year, where a lot of these a lot of these teams who are stuck here in the US, they can't do things in market anymore, and this is such a huge season for the Overwatch League. I think you saw from the start of it, these homestands, which people were very very much bearish on, in a sense that they didn't think it was going to be successful, really were doing well to begin with. And some of these groups can't even interact with their fan base. Like I think some of them are based in like some of the European teams are on the East Coast, essentially, because for competition reasons they kind of have to stay here, so they can't connect in Paris or in London.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, like I know you look at what the Fuel are doing in Dallas, and I know this, obviously they're great rivals and essentially frenemies for the Outlaws, but like the stuff that they're doing with some of the school districts, and what they can do at the Esports Stadium in Arlington, I think is really awesome. In providing like opportunities for high school, almost putting on their own high school esports competitions.
Yep.
That you normally wouldn't have the ability to do, but when you have an org like them backing it and providing some of that, some of that structure and promotion and kind of gravitas that comes with the organization, and then having like a space to handle it, to do it all in. I just think it's so great to see, and you hope to see other teams start to take that on as well, which I think they will. It's going to take some time for everybody to get their bearings and to kind of get their organization set. But it'll happen sooner rather than later that more colleges and high schools will get involved, especially from Overwatch, because it's obviously a more family-friendly game than Call of Duty.
Right.
And I think that school administrators are going to gravitate towards that more so than they would like having a Call of Duty tournament.
For sure. My own, my superintendent is 100% no on Call of Duty or Rainbow Six Siege, like any mature rated game, really. But Overwatch is within the realm of doable because it is a different style and a different, it's not that same.
Are they just giving
hyper realistic
game? Where are they?
I guess they just decided they didn't want to try anymore.
No.
Maybe they're just saving up.
Oh, okay, they're coming from the main. Oh, nice. Really nice.
I'll take it. She Anna powered up the Zarya, so it took a lot more rockets.
Now, are you guys from a high school level working with some of the colleges that are also, have esports clubs, or how's that? How does that work between the two?
We actually have Matt, who's been in the chat this whole time. We are all about partnering with any colleges in Texas that have programs that want to get involved with us. We really want to see kind of a connection with those organizations, and not just connect, but even partner and help grow their programs and have them help us grow ours. And we talked about a lot of our organizers don't really have coaching experience or don't play the games, and they don't really know their way around. And so what would it look like to maybe have some of those college students help coach the high school teams once a week or whatever. So we really do want to see that kind of connection, and we want to. Part of the problem is our biggest state universities, A&M, UT, whatever. All of their stuff is purely like student-led, and they don't have the coaches. It's the smaller schools that have started offering scholarships and hiring coaches and things to differentiate themselves. Yep. And so we hope that A&M and UT and I don't really care about Texas Tech, but we hope that we see that kind of connection with the state universities and the bigger schools, really putting money into it and supporting it.
Are you seeing like these schools reach out to you guys as like looking for, hey, like, I mean, essentially scouting or asking about talent, in a way from, like, we talked about, like, essentially colleges being a feeder system potentially, or in the future, are any of these colleges asking you guys about people in your club who might be, good fits for the programs they're building out?
I've had, I don't know about in Greg's case, but I've actually had several organizational people say, hey, if you've got a kid playing in such and such tournament that's at this level or whatever, like, send them my way. We have a team, we have scholarships. I know Matt, like I said, he's on our board, and he does both high school and college. He's actually doubling up there. and he has mentioned like he's been watching the competitions because he's going to want to recruit teams as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
I've got unfinished business.
But yeah, we have several good partnerships, and I think that you know, we're on the cusp of a few others too that are actually just really game changing. So, but I mean, the collegiate space is just rife with opportunity for kids, and I think that that one thing that has been sort of a, you know, a downfall, but just a side effect of the pro scene getting so much attention and getting kids at such a young age is that it's just kind of assumed that, like, well, I could just go straight to pro without thinking about that, you know, collegiate is going to give you a lot of value as well, and it's a new scholarship opportunity that just wasn't there until
Yeah.
very
What is it,
recently.
like 80 some? Did I hear like how many schools have it now? Like 80 plus?
I think we're well over 100 in the U.S. alone.
There are
it just keeps growing.
Yeah, there are 220 esports scholarships, or colleges with esports scholarships of some sort. Excuse me, can't speak and
That's
play this game.
phenomenal. You know, like when I first got into you know, at Infinite Esports, like two of our brightest guys, our brightest employees were presidents of their esports club. One of which was at Michigan, and the other one was at LSU, and they were absolutely awesome at what they did. And I think that, you know, being part of their club and being president of their club and a leader had helped shape them to, you know, to become, like, you know, great employees. And now they're both, you know, still killing it. One is at an agency, and the other one is with the esports stadium in Arlington. But they you know, I think their experience at their clubs and what they had to work on from a responsibility level was really important to their
Yeah, and that's not even their gameplay experience. That's the other stuff
Right.
they were doing that really benefited them.
Exactly, the organization, you know, the recruiting, kind of the scheduling, project management, you know, making connections with people within the school systems, so that, like, the deans knew who they were and what they were doing. I think you know, all of those pieces, you know, help make somebody who, like, you have a well-rounded set of experience. When somebody says, like, hey, I need somebody with some business experience, you have that, even though maybe you didn't necessarily work for a company specifically.
Yeah. Here's a kind of a out of left field, but with any of the organizations you've been with, what about, like, statisticians? Because I know in a lot of professional sports, you see stats really heavily used, and I feel like that's still kind of a new area in esports. But I was wondering, did y'all have any? Did y'all pay professional statisticians or anything like that, or was it more y'all had people who knew the games and kind of focused on it that way?
You know, that, from what I can tell, you know, like the Outlaws had people who kind of knew the games early on, in terms of stats. I'm not sure how, like, the latest coaching staff was handling it, you know, with Dream and Harsha. But I agree that those areas, I feel like, are very underdeveloped. You look at, like, how, you know, you look at the greatness that is, like, Moneyball, and you know, finding those undervalued skill sets. And I don't think anybody has figured out in esports how to necessarily evaluate talent and find those diamonds in the rough. I think that's something that, like, in the future needs to be, you know, somebody's going to need to, like, get on that, and whoever does early on is going to be, you know, be very successful, because it's all data, and, like, putting, you know, traditional sports into X's and O's is a lot harder, or in ones and zeros rather, it's a lot harder than it is for something like this, where you have an API and you can just go pull the data, and get the information that you need to find out, like, what is it that helps somebody actually, like, you know, what is it that's making this team so good, or what's making this player so good. Like, whoever figures out what you know, what OPS is in esports is could be very
that's going to go a
successful
long
from an
way.
evaluation standpoint.
Yeah.
Speaking of APIs, if there are any developers out there that ever see this chat, for the love of God, make your APIs better and more available.
For real.
Because like from the league standpoint of what we want to do, being able to pull scores at the end of a match and not have to submit them with screenshots would just be so useful. And basically, League of Legends has that, and pretty much nobody else really has that level of developed API integration that I'd love to see.
Yeah. Well, cool. That was fun. I played that
It
well.
was a lot of fun. That was a good close last push.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we pulled that back from 99%, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
I was not doing the DPS I should have been, so I switched to Farah, and that made the difference, I think. Cool. Okay. You got any other final questions in the chat or anything just from you, Patrick?
Mostly I'm just seeing a lot of people saying good things about high school to college to pro and what that could look like, or going pro and then coming back to high school. I mean, to college. Don't come back to high school, hopefully. Yeah, that as long as the NCAA stays out of it, there's you can go pro and then come back. And heck, I think UC Irvine did that with a couple of their League of Legends players, were like retired pro players that they brought in to compete in the college scene. So I do think that's a very interesting. And to everybody out in the chat, thank y'all for questions and participation. That really, y'all came up with a lot of stuff I didn't think of that drove us down some cool pathways.
Yeah. Well, Chris, I'm going to ask one more question to sort of lead us out. If we've got, students who will hopefully, if they're not watching now, the same in the VOD, we'll put this up on YouTube. So if you could say anything to our high schoolers who are going to be part of tech staff or, whatever their state organization is, or just are interested in getting into esports in some way, what would you say by way of like motivating them if they're looking to get into the industry? I mean, we kind of talked about this a lot earlier, but just where do you see the most benefit for them, and how can they be being proactive as a 15, 16, 17-year-old kid?
Yep. Sure. Well, I mean, first of all, thank you for having me. Like you said, great questions in the chat. I think we had a lot of good interaction there, and I'm glad we had some really insightful questions and some good insight here as well. People answering the questions on their own. I think from a standpoint of somebody who's been in the industry for a little bit, like I would say, don't be afraid to raise your hand for anything. Like, I think there's the big debate of like working for free or not working for free, and finding your value. But early on, you need to show like some initiative and like, hey, I'm willing to do pretty much whatever to gain experience, and like be willing to adapt and try new things. And if you're in the industry or trying to get in, but networking is key. Working with your administrators at your high schools or colleges, or reaching out to people on LinkedIn or Twitter. And when you reach out to them for a connection or ask something, I mean, you have to be very direct. Like, I get a lot of requests on LinkedIn, but if I don't know the person and they don't necessarily put a message with it, then I'm very likely not going to agree to connect with them, just because I like to, I have a network of people, and that's important to me. But if you write like, hey, I'm a high school student, I'd love to chat with you about this, or like, I'm looking to do this, like, I'm way more likely to accept it and find a time for you. And I think a lot of people in the esports industry are very open to it, but you need to understand of like, you need to be direct in asking that question. And I think people are very willing to help and spend like 15 to 20 minutes of their time talking to you about their background and like what you can do to get involved. So I think networking is very important. And I think finding your passion is extremely important. We all love gaming. Gaming is a great passion, but there might be other things that you love to do or you love more than gaming, and you want to combine the two of them. And I think the esports industry is in a place where you can do that. And it's getting to a place where you can do that. So, you don't have to be a pro, you don't have to be a president, you don't have to be a GM. There's a variety of different roles within esports, from working as a developer to being on a platform, to being in video production, design, whatever that might be. But they all have to do with gaming. So I mean, if you like accounting, there's plenty of groups and esports jobs available for accountants. I see them all the time on Hitmarker or LinkedIn. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in esports. You just need to find what you're passionate about and go pursue it and reach out to people who might be doing it and see if they can spend a couple minutes just chatting with you and networking, because connections are going to help open doors for you if you really want to get in this industry.
Definitely.
Awesome. I know this is off topic, and I know we were just finishing up, but you mentioned you have a history degree as your undergrad. I believe, Greg, you also did history. Is that right?
Sure did.
And I have a minor in history. So clearly, the way into esports is history.
Obviously. Look to the future by studying the past.
History and political science, you know?
Hey,
That's hilarious.
it provides valuable, valuable critical thinking skills. So I think it's not a bad degree. Like, I always, when I went to college, I did like a bunch of kind of orientation pieces. We had all these alumni come back and speak with us, and the thing that they impressed on me the most was that your major kind of doesn't matter at the end of the day. I think, yes, I mean, there's certain degrees where it does matter, obviously, but for more general Bachelor of Art degrees, it's less specific. So, I mean, the fact that I'm a history major doesn't necessarily mean I have to be a history teacher or a historian or work in a museum. And I think, you look at a lot of people who are in those kind of BA programs, and they go on to a variety of different things, no matter what their degree might be.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, great. Chris, once again, thank you. We really appreciate you being our, like, as you said, our lead-off guy for this. It's just going to be hard to fill your shoes, I think, for the next one. So if you know anybody that you want to send our way, please feel free to let me know.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Happy to do it. I'll try to think of some people and see what I can do for you guys. Really appreciate the time. Great to connect again.
Absolutely. Well, let us
Thank
know
you so
what we
much.
can do for you, and we will keep in touch, man. We appreciate it.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, everybody.
No problem.
Be safe out there.
And with that, I'm going to end the stream. I appreciate everybody tuning in and just hanging out with us and asking questions. Want to try to do this as a weekly thing if I can, and see if we can get some more esports industry people just to come in and share their experience and what the industry is like for them and how they got there, because that's our end goal. We want our kids to be able to look at the esports industry as an attainable goal and something that they can actually put as, I guess, a goal. There's something that they can push for and actually, guide their education around, and because it is a real burgeoning industry and it's only growing. So we hope that you guys considered some of the things that Chris said, some of the things that we're talking about today, and that you'll join us next week. Thanks for everything, and we'll see you later.
Bye.